It's Carl with a K. Let's talk about Hollywood. Welcome to the show. Hi everyone, this is Carl Gibson and welcome to Let's Talk About Hollywood. This is episode number 33. I'm excited about it. The podcast started September 24th of 2025. That's when I launched it. I launched it with a few episodes because I knew I wanted to leave enough there in case people wanted to binge and get into it. And so here we are, 33 episodes later. So I'm really happy about it. This is my third episode this week because I have had donations to the podcast. This podcast runs on donations. So if you'd ever like to support the podcast, I'll just say it quickly. There's no mid-roll. We'll get right to it. You can either go to my website, www.letstalkabouthollywood, and there's a donate tab there. Or you can just type in www.letstalkabouthollywood.com/support, and you can support that way. Also, the link is in the show notes, meaning the episode description. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll be able to find it. And you can just click on it. No amount is too small. This podcast will always be free. And so it is from contributions like yours, including most recently by Carl B., where I can do more episodes. There's just more time to do it. So we're going to get right into this episode. But before I do, I want to thank also everyone who's been listening and downloading this week. And the top countries are, and the only countries, by the way. So it's not like I'm leaving out India or the Netherlands or other territories. I'm going specifically by this week. So thank you to the listeners and downloaders. First and foremost, in the U.S., that's where the majority of them come from. But also a huge, for me, audience in Spain, France, Finland, Germany, the UK, Italy, and China. Thank you all for listening and making me a part of your day or evening. I truly appreciate it. We're a community, and I love you for it. I truly do, and you know I do. So this episode, this is going to be about this. Well, I've already written it, and it's from the journals. This is from 2002. I was an editorial assistant, and I was an editorial assistant at The Hollywood Reporter specifically. And this episode is really kind of a slice of life about being an assistant and the highs and lows. And there's a lot to say in the recap. And I'll just say, if you're an assistant right now, hang in there. And especially if you're an assistant in Hollywood, but this applies to being an assistant anywhere. Because as I've said, I, at the time, was a 31-year-old editorial assistant, and editorial assistants tended to be in their early 20s at the time because it wasn't a high-paying job. Of course, at the Hollywood Reporter, it paid a little more than others. But even if you were an agency back then at William Morris or CAA at the time, before these different merges, it was not a high-paying job. The logic seemed to be that you would accept a lower salary. That way you were showing your mettle and showing that you could do it. And then you would do it for, say, 2 to 3 years. And then after that, you'd segue into something else. So whatever that specialty was. So in my case, in the Hollywood Reporter, I know a lot of people ended up going from being an assistant to PR work, for example. There had been a couple of promotions in the past where someone had been an editorial assistant but then became a reporter. But that track had ended because it depends on how well that person does. So if an assistant gets promoted to a mainline job and then has issues, then they kind of go, okay, we're going to stop that track for a while. Now, some of those people ended up are still marquee reporters to this day. But when I was there, that wasn't necessarily the case. But the bottom line is you need to establish yourself when you're an assistant as the best. You really do. I don't think you need to compete with the other editorial assistants. I think or the other assistants in your job. You just need to have your own identity. You need to do the work. But at the same time, you have to look out for yourself, because as an assistant, a lot of times you're just considered not as a person, but the job title. It's a fact. They consider you sometimes as the lowest rung on the ladder. If you don't want to do it, ask an assistant. You don't want to be bothered, ask an assistant. And it doesn't mean that everyone talks to you that way or treats you like a maid. It really can just depend on who you work for. For example, as an assistant, I didn't get laundry. I didn't get coffee. Now, for those who do, I'm not saying you're getting played or that you got played. It just wasn't a thing. I was an editorial assistant for a department, so that would have meant 8 people were asking me for coffee, or 8 people asking me to, pick up their dry cleaning, which, it's like I don't have enough time to pick up my own dry cleaning. Seriously, I was that person who had to get my dry cleaning on Saturdays before they closed at 4 o'clock, that kind of thing. So anyway, I think when you're an assistant, you have to really establish yourself as an identity, as being helpful, but also keeping an eye out for your own career track. And I say to anyone who's an assistant now, just absorb, be a sponge. It's a cliche, but it's true. Soak it up. Observe. I came in to being an assistant as an actor. So my whole thing as an actor was to observe, get the rhythms, see how people talk, see what's going on, get the vibe, and flow with it. So anyway, this episode is about that assistant life. I'm in my first year of it. And as I say in the journals, it's sometimes like a sitcom, but not as funny. And we're going to get right into it. This is 2002, and this episode is called Hollywood Assistant, Pay Your Dues, Not Your Identity. Sunday, August 4th, 2002. The new apartment is ours, me and Bebbles. It's going to be a whole new life. Finally, I will probably take a week off from the Hollywood Reporter since my sister is coming and I'm excited about it. Stone can't take off any days with his new job, so I can handle more of the move myself later. At work, I finally got the magazine to pay for business cards for me and my co-editorial assistant. Initially, the two of us were told that we could scratch off the name of a current staffer's business card and write our names on the back of it. This option was floated when we both were invited to a themed assistant party where there was to be a raffle of business cards. We didn't go to the party, and when our manager asked us why, I answered, because it would be too tacky for us to attend a party as editorial assistants of a multi-million-dollar paper and we're using scratched out business cards. We can't be embarrassed like that. Why let Hollywood know the cheapness of it all? That's what I said. Well, our supervisor saw my point, and I mentioned people that we've met that we can't give our business cards to for the exchange of news. We even offered to pay for our business cards. But then the answer in the end was, fine, just get the bullshit cards. So that was a victory. My co-assistant told a bunch of people how calm and businesslike I am and how I'm good at getting us more respect. The cost for 500 business cards each, $120. I felt good about it. At least the future assistants that come in after us will be able to get their own business cards. Stone bought clothes for me yesterday for my upcoming season 2 at the Hollywood Reporter, which starts in October. I felt like I'd robbed a bank. 5 beautiful and fly shirts, plus 2 pairs of classic pants, a watch, and he replaced my sunglasses I lost last week. It was an amazing clothes shopping trip. I haven't bought clothes since I was a temp last year, and then it was about stress and survival, not about looks. What made it even better? We bought it all at this unassuming little shop on Hollywood Boulevard. The owners are from the islands. Stone was so happy to get the clothes for me and really so nice about it. Tuesday, August 6th, 2002. It's 5:25 p.m. and there's all this office chaos in the newsroom and people milking me before my vacation starts. I got volunteered to lead next week's mandatory fire drill. The only problem? Carl will be on vacation and nowhere near here. Drama. One of the sub-editors has been a mix between hilarious and impatient. She was talking about one of her prescriptions, and it may as well have been nitro, because she's on a mega tear. She called the cafe downstairs and asked, "Do you have any milk?" The Eastern European man who answered the phone in the cafe couldn't understand her request, and so she shouted, "Milk!" It was shrill and hilarious. She decided to go on and spelled it, "Milk! M-A-L-K." The whole newsroom started laughing because she wasn't spelling it right, but being a diva nonetheless. Got malk? 15 minutes later, I heard a huge thud, only to see one of the reporters had walked into a huge glass wall. It was too thick to break, but when I turned and saw his forehead pasted on the glass, I had to flee the room to process the unintended slapstick. Then another editor didn't know how to fax, begged for help, and on and on. It's been like faulty towers today. Then there was a minor gas leak suspected in the newsroom. One of the reporters freaked out and said, "I'm not blowing up in this office." Another manager went to investigate and said, "I can feel it in my eyes," and began to squint with purpose and lost her balance for good measure. Security came, made a call, and that's the last I've heard about it. Then my computer crashed, and it was just a sitcom at this point, but not as funny. Wednesday, August 7th, 2002. I just had an argument in the newsroom. I was multitasking, and a flaky reporter had a mouthful of Arby's and mumbled through the pieces when his phone rang. "Can you get that for me?" I technically don't have to answer reporters' phone lines unless a second call on their extension goes off. I don't mind, but the silly helplessness of his request irked me, and it showed. I took the call, and the reporter said, "You have a bit of attitude there." I asked, "Who?" "You," he replied. I said, "I help you all the time, and you're sitting there helpless, eating a sandwich. Shit." I told my boss I'll gladly go home and pack up my apartment for my move before I'll take that from some alcoholic. This was said privately, of course. Considering this is the same reporter who walked into and dinged his head on a plate glass wall yesterday, he has a lot of nerve. He didn't argue back, but this is the same reporter who begged me last week to call and cancel his colonoscopy, which I did, and he's gonna get jazzy today, and he's not my boss. He just came over to my desk and thanked me and said, "I'm so good at my job." I didn't fall for his deceit, but I did squash it. Until next time. Thursday, August 8th, 2002. It has been a crazy day. They're all crazy days lately, with the editorial budget due to be submitted soon. We have to submit our budgets for the department for next year, so everyone has to do their travel expense reports and factor in everything, from hotel expenses to computer needs while on assignment. AFM, Cannes, Venice, all of it. My co-editorial assistant and I are not included as far as that goes because we're stationed here, and our columns can be done right here in the main newsroom here in LA. However, they better be budgeting for nice raises for us, I'll tell you that. I already mentioned it to my boss more than once, probably twice in the last month. Nothing excessive. They know we bust our asses, so it better be nice, and it would be nice to be represented. At a Hollywood party I recently took Stone to, one of the production workers told me that she thinks I work harder than some of the reporters, and that she respected me a lot. She said, "I see the work you do." Hopefully, management will too. It will be an easier blow to absorb if it doesn't go well with my raise, considering I'll be with Stone under a new roof. Besides, I need to do another year and a half here. I started temping here July 30th, 2001, and I got hired October 22nd, 2001. I have a ways to go, until my planned 2.5 years are up here. I have to keep my momentum because once I leave here and devote myself to writing and acting, I will hopefully not have to work outside of the industry ever again. The next step, conventionally, should be working PR somewhere, but I'll be 33 years old by then, which isn't awful, but I don't want to spend any more years subjugating my own shit. I need to take the leap in 2004, and Stone will be there to help me out, as I have with his dry spells. Since 9/11, security is getting way tight. We had a crew of workmen here today, an all-black security team, installing what will be keycard scanners at every conceivable entrance. I was walking to turn the corner, and the key engineer was staring at me with almost laser clarity and a stoic, vague expression for a long time. He looked like he was having either an X-rated dream sequence or he wanted to fight me. I couldn't really tell. He had the smallest of cell phones in his hand and was talking on it and staring still. I slowed my pace and returned the eye contact with a "what's up" stoicism so he'd know I was aware he was staring. He was stationed in the newsroom doorway, and so I had to pass him a lot of times while he played the staring game every time, all day. It was uncomfortable because here he was in the newsroom, and I was the only other brother in the joint. I could feel his appraising eyes and only imagine the lunchtime talk with his crew. Then, when I was in the bathroom at the sink, he came into there and saw me and fled. He was tripping for nothing. I felt like a unicorn, like he was thinking I was the only black guy in the place except for the security guards, and privileged. Little does he know, he makes tons more money than me per hour, per year. He packed up his toolboxes and left around 5. His crew has to come back and finish the job tomorrow. I heard him tell one of his guys, "I don't like naked wires. I'll need you here early." He was my age and build. He had a great ass, though. I wish mine was like that. You're either born with it or you're not. And he was. August 23rd, 2002, Friday. I'm entering the last couple of days of my vacation. My sister left yesterday back to the East Coast. We had a terrific time, went to Vegas, and we both won hundreds. We got to do everything we wanted to do, except we missed the Andy Warhol retrospective show downtown. I can thank my bosses for that. They called me in for a hush-hush urgent meeting on my vacation, and the unknown nature of this meeting rattled me and my sister's nerves. My sister chilled at What's Brewing on Wilshire, a coffee house, while I went to the meeting. My direct boss, the editor, was a half hour late for our noon meeting, and my direct supervisor was there, my supervisor who supervises me and the other editorial assistant that I work with. My editorial assistant partner was infuriated that I had been called in for this meeting on my vacation and promised to cover for me next week, which was nice. She didn't even have to do that. The reporters that were there looked nervous in the newsroom, seeing me called in on my vacation. My boss and my supervisor called me and my editorial assistant partner in and told us that our direct supervisor is leaving. Our supervisor is leaving by choice, and happily. However, my direct boss, the editor, then spoke of how some of her duties would be absorbed by him and the deputy editor. He says that he wants to promote from within, and that while my co-editorial assistant and I would have to compete and really sell ourselves to him in our respective interview meetings, that we were immediate candidates and he wanted to move fast. I deferred to my assistant partner. She's been there first, and said that there would be no competition because she was welcome for the opportunity if she wanted it. I said I'd been there for a year and I felt fine with my job. I'm good at it. My supervisor stressed that I was good at keeping people in line in a business-like manner. But the bottom line is, I don't want the job. The editor even predicted, "There'll be nights you'll go home pissed at me for yelling or whatever I choose to say." Working for the editor would kill every bit of enthusiasm I have for the job now. I already have 53 phone lines to cover. I get scoops, and I talk to everybody that matters in this town. I get the faxes and the mail. Working for the top You get cut off at the knees. My editorial assistant partner and I, we talked about it, and she said she'd think about submitting for the role. I told her I had her back either way. They had to send a temp home the day before. One of the reporters said, "Carl, don't ever leave us again." Another news editor came over and said, "Is this your last day?" I said, "No, I'm on vacation." She said, "Good. I don't have to be sad then." I've since heard from my partner, and she has turned the job down and told our editor boss that I don't want the job either. That's awesome. The editor can't miss the fact that we both don't want the job. The truth is, we're part of a bigger publishing company, an empire really, and there are lapses in key leadership areas, and there are a lot of newsrooms that have a climate of low morale and a class system. Sometimes mediocre talent is prized, and friends of save the day. I could manage it. I don't want to be a suit. I need to be on my way to bigger and better out there as an actor or writer. I'm glad that my boss had to at least acknowledge that neither of his preferred choices wanted to assist him. There would have been a pay hike and a byline credit, but we both passed. I'm glad we did. We want raises for the jobs that we're doing now. So it's back to work, and then moving at the end of next week. I can't wait. More later. Okay, that's the end of the journal entry, and now it's time for the recap. So, this, like I said in the beginning, this is kind of a slice of life of what it was like to be an assistant at that time in the aughts. And I don't imagine that the basics and the foundations of it have changed that much. As you can see, there are some clashes there. Though, when I was reading it, it is funny because, to me, some of it is funny because, like in the last episode, someone said, can you change the water bottle? And I said, not in this outfit, call plant operations. And it wasn't like I didn't like plant operations. I was very good friends with plant ops, the ones who do change the water bottles and do a lot of the office maintenance. And a lot of times they'd be like, look, don't change the water bottle so much because, that's our job. So I don't think they were union, but kind of like don't show us up kind of thing. But we were all friends. So when I look back at some of these exchanges, it seems very sitcom-y. Like, oh, there's the sassy assistant. But it really wasn't like that. The truth of the matter was I worked my ass off. Most assistants do. There's really not a lot of time for a lot of personality or anything like that. This particular editor who was eating his Arby's and said, could you get that for me? Because he just couldn't be bothered to pick up his one phone line. We had clashes before. We ended up being very good friends. Truly. I was there 6 more years from this 2002. I was there until 2008 at the Hollywood Reporter. And he was there the whole time with me. And our friendship did get better. But we had clashes. There would be more clashes to come. I remember he made one of my assistants cry, which made me furious because I don't think that you should ever talk to someone professionally to where you make them cry. It was he could be very imperious. And we had also had a clash where maybe not long before this request he made, an agent from Paradigm, I think that was the agency at the time, had called in and on speakerphone called me a guard dog or an attack dog. Said, oh, you've got a good attack dog there as an assistant. And the reporter said, I know. Ho, 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 ho. Like the Muppets. Ho, 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 ho. I'm like, that shit ain't funny. I'm not a fucking dog. And the dude was a twerp from Paradigm. But we're friends now, too. So, see, that's Hollywood. Twerps become friends. Hey, not come over to my house, friends, but show friends, business friends. So, again, it is funny when I look back on it because I'm being like super sharp sometimes with people when I have to be, but it's not because it's like, you don't talk to me like that as an assistant. It's because at this time, I'm 31 years old. Like, I'm a full grown ass man, and you just don't talk to me like, we're in a sharecropper co-op. Doesn't work like that. And really, when the title of this episode is called Hollywood Assistant, Pay Your Dues, Not Your Identity. Your identity and your work ethic is really all you have. So I don't really feel that you need to go around checking all these people, because like I said, your bottom line duty is you're there to help make things go faster. It's like I say, even now in interviews that I haven't been an assistant in 20 years or almost 20 years I'm not there to change the wheel. I'm there to help the wheel spin faster. I'm there to help it work. I'm there to help you. I'm very much an ensemble person. Even when I was a singer, I loved solos, but I really loved ensembles. I loved having my tenor line or my baritone line. I loved harmony. When I was a lead as an actor, I loved having other leads. It doesn't need to be just me doing, as an actor, 8 pages, or me singing 4 songs in a row by myself. I have no problem being part of an ensemble. It's actually my favorite. Harmony is my favorite. Ever since I learned to read music when I was 13 years old, it became a passion. So I applied that same ethic when I was in the newsroom. So as an assistant, you don't, it's not so much, hey, don't fuck with me. It's just establishing some boundaries and establishing some respect, because you will get respect when you take up for yourself. And it doesn't have to be these throwdown arguments. It can be little things. It can be not responding too. And there's a ecosystem there too, because I think a lot of times, as I said, in the hierarchy of these multi-million-dollar Hollywood enterprises, or even if not, it could be a startup or it could be a small business. The assistants, I think a lot of times the higher-ups just figure, well, the assistants are talking amongst themselves, and we are. But at the same time, assistants know other assistants, and assistants know what's going on. So it's not necessarily this upstairs, downstairs thing, because you're all on the same floor or you're all in the same unit or division. But there's lots of ways that you can establish respect and credibility and work ethic by just doing the best that you can. But when people really push it, you do have to take up for yourself. You absolutely do, but always do the best that you can first and foremost. And of course, if it's abusive, then you can't be there. You got to get out. Because I know lots of people who have, I know some of these Hollywood screamers, some that went to jail, not for being rude to their assistants, but I'm saying either their assistants, it's like I can't find them on LinkedIn. I can't find them on anywhere. And it's not because something mysterious happened to them. They're just like, I'm out. Fuck this. This is too much. So when I read that book, Swimming with Sharks, like I said, I don't think that it's so much that there are sharks in the water, because you can go into the ocean and there's sharks everywhere. There's sharks near the shoreline. They just don't bother you. But if they see you're in distress, or if they smell blood in the water, or if they're just hungry, then they do what sharks do. So it's more about keeping them at bay. You always know they're there. You just do your best to not let them have any reason to come for you, even though that's their nature and they don't need any reason at all. Now, the Hollywood Reporter, no one that I'm dealing with here is a shark, but they have their own roles, they have their own trajectories, they have their own relationships, they have their own everything. It's their ride. And that's another thing you learn. Everyone has their ride. Everyone, pretty much, if you stay in the game, gets their time up at bat. And sometimes you hit a home run and sometimes you don't. But until your time comes, just observe, watch, learn from their mistakes. And so what I loved about this was really that my co-editorial assistant and we stuck together, and we weren't going to be played against each other. And I think that's what the thinking was. They're going to compete for this job, and then neither of us wanted it. So now there's a vacancy. Now, that job will end up becoming mine, but later. I'm going to say no again more than once. And I still maintained a great relationship with my co-editorial assistant, who also got promoted, and started working as an editor as well. So we always worked together. I think what I was happiest about, and that'll come up in later journal entries, is that our relationship didn't change. It's not like I ended up taking this promotion and then we just couldn't stand each other, or someone changed. I think the logic was, well, at least if I'm in a management position, then we've got each other's backs. We don't have to worry about someone else coming in and managing us and not being as cool as our supervisor who was leaving was. So yeah, pay your dues if you're an assistant, and just not your identity. And if it's not the right fit, then don't force it. Because there can be typecasting too. I can tell you honestly, and having looked for jobs for over the last year, because as you know, Hollywood is bonkers and the business model's bonkers, and it's just, I feel like the audience and content is being subjugated over ideology and just weird business models. I'm just saying, like, how does this work? Like, aren't we supposed to be making stuff? Don't we care what the audience thinks? And I know that lots of people are. I'm not saying Hollywood's gone to hell in a handbasket, but it is having an identity crisis. Let's be real. And, well, we are being real. And I find a lot of times, having known some of these people in the town for decades now, there are some people who met me as an assistant, and it's not like they're holding that against me, because I was a damn good assistant. But it's like they don't know that I ended up working in streaming. Half of them don't know that I went and became an editorial associate for the New York Times Media Group. They don't know that I was at Netflix. They don't know, because it wasn't really about me tooting my own horn. It was about the work. So, like on LinkedIn, I never put down a job like Netflix until it was over. I never put down Warner Brothers until it was over, because I just wasn't trying to have that look at me energy. It was about the work. And like Disney Plus, where I just was, and Daredevil, Born Again season 2, which was the last show I worked on, that just came out on Disney Plus on March 24th, 2026. So Daredevil, Born Again season 2 is out. But even when I was working on that, I wasn't going on LinkedIn like, living the dream, Daredevil, Born Again season 2. That would have been so cringe, and it would have been gross, and it wasn't just about, it wasn't about me. And same with Star Wars, when I would be working on the Star Wars series. It's like me and 50 other people who can work on that show behind the scenes in a management way. So it just, and you've got NDAs and you've signed all these non-disclosures, like it would have been nuts. So I think sometimes, I've had many other identities, but I think once an assistant, sometimes always an assistant to some of those people, which really shouldn't matter, but they should let you grow up. It's almost like being typecast. It's almost like, I'm not that teenager on the sitcom. I'm an adult now. But all of these things inform your work, and it also informs how you treat other people. And like before Hollywood, I was a waiter, so I'm not rude to waiters. I feel like if you know what it's like to be in a typically low paying position where you're doing a lot of work and having to use a lot of those muscles that you'll use, thank goodness, when you're promoted or when you go on to your next thing. I think that's what deserves respect, and that's what people hopefully will see. And again, if they don't, then don't do it. And as far as that part in the journal where I was like, in 2004, I'll be out of the Hollywood Reporter, and I won't have to work a job outside of the industry again. Well, that didn't happen. You can trust me there. There were a couple of times that happened. One, I worked in the private sector briefly, and another, I worked at Gold's Gym, which is a story for another day. They were all very nice, by the way. But I worked corporate at Gold's Gym in Northridge. Yeah. For a week. But you do what you got to do. So I won't jump ahead of myself. But yeah, there's a lot of takeaways. Just again, if you're an assistant, pay your dues, not your identity or your personhood. And if you're someone who has assistants, just be nice. Just look, the better you do, the better assistants do. And assistants can help you get there. Now, they shouldn't have to, do that part for you. But I'm saying if they support you and they believe in you, then believe in them. It works both ways, because a lot of times it's not always a friendship. It's not always close. There have been times I've had assistants, we've had clashes, and you don't necessarily have that bond, especially if you weren't the person who chose the assistant. If the assistant was chosen for you, then sometimes there's growing pains there. But ultimately, you want what's best for them, and what's best for yourself. So it can work. Just keep your identity intact and know that better things are coming, and they will come. It takes time, but they do come. I'm living proof, and so many other people are too. And I'm also living proof of downturns and when it's hard, like right now, which a lot of us can relate to, and that's why I share these things. So that's this episode for this week. Thank you again for everyone who listened. Thank you for tuning in. If you're just now joining the podcast, you've got 32 other episodes you can listen to, and you can just start from the beginning. Start with episode 1 and work your way up if you like. I'm so glad you're here. Feel free to come back. Please come back. And also, you can rate, share, subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. This podcast is everywhere. It's on Audible. It's on Spotify. It's on the Apple iTunes Store, iHeartMedia, everywhere. So wherever you get your podcast, if you're listening to this now, subscribe and you'll know when a new episode is out. And have a wonderful, safe weekend. Thank you again. And don't forget, as always, love is real. And I wish you all great things. I'll see you next time.